yeah, let's begin. All right, so I'm going to be talking about scaling FileMaker. It's in a particular way. I'm not covering every aspect of scaling FileMaker. I'm going to be going through and talking to you about a particular project that I worked on it was in the middle of 2015, and the lessons learned from that project. We had to take a 1 terabyte set of fixed length files and get them into a FileMaker database. That was the goal. And the FileMaker database ended up being 2.2 terabytes in size with 17 billion records in one table. And there were a lot of roadblocks along the way that we're going to go over, and then you guys, I'm sure, will learn some interesting things about how FileMaker behaves working with that size of a table. So my name is Jeremiah Hammond. I'm Senior Technical Project Lead at DB Services. I'm certified in the past 6 versions. I've been working with FileMaker for almost a decade now. I am the trainer for classes at DB Services. And then as far as our company, we're a FileMaker Platinum partner. We're part of the Apple Consultant Network. We currently have a staff of 15 people. 10 of those are certified developers. And we have offices in Indianapolis and Cincinnati. So as far as assumptions that I'm making in the presentation, I'm assuming that everybody has had experience building simple FileMaker solutions, and that you have some familiarity with basic computer terms, like what's a processor, what's a disk, etc. So we're going to be hitting those every once in a while. As far as, has anyone pushed FileMaker to the limit in terms of database size, not database size, but the number of records in a table? Okay, how big are we talking here? How many records? Yeah, that's big. That's large in a charge. What records? What kind of records are they?
They're individual. We work for a record company, and we keep track individually of every download or stream.
Okay.
Like Apple Music or something, and so it's a line item being invoiced.
Okay.
So every single one is run some separate records.
How long has this database been around?
9 or 10 years.
Okay. I'm sure it didn't start out with millions of records.
No, actually, it was originally a single file with a single before I.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, this project is not normal, and we had talked to the client. We were like, hey, we don't know what's going to happen here. Are you sure you want to continue? He basically he just wanted to query the data. He wanted to just get it somewhere where we could actually do some basic queries, because fixed length files are very unfriendly in terms of doing any sort of searching. So that was the main goal of what we did.
One of the interesting observations we did at the National Genetic College other time, took it over.
Mm-hmm.
It had 55 million programs.
Right.
The interesting thing was they wanted us to delete it and put 55 million rows back in on a weekly basis.
Oh, wow.
Right? And FileMaker has an internal record ID count maximum. So every time you deleted a record, FileMaker goes back to the index, but kept the record ID. So we really simplified a lot.
Yep. So he's touching on something that is kind of like a big takeaway from this, is that as you scale, as you have more records in the table, little details are going to matter more. Things that you didn't have to ever worry about with normal development become problems. And you end up spending the overwhelming majority of your development working around these problems. So you'll get to see some of what we had to do for this project. Okay, so what I'm going to cover, so I'm going to give you a tour of a 2 billion record file. I want to do a subset. I have this on my computer. This is an SSD. It's 500 gigabytes. I can't take the original 17 billion and put on here. It's 2.2 terabytes, but 2 billion gets the point across. Yeah, but it was just all it was one table to be able to query stuff. So the goal was to get these fixed length files into a FileMaker file and then to index whatever fields that the client wanted to query. So, and then I'll give you the story behind the file and some interesting findings along the way, such as what things are disk bound, what common operations that, again, you normally wouldn't have to worry about too much, but once you go to these levels, it becomes obvious which things SSDs matter or which things a faster CPU matters. And then we did run into a 32-bit, 64-bit limitation. Yeah, stuff, yeah, never would you, yeah, no, I can't express to you how many just I'd walk into work the next day, check the import, and the import stopped working, you look into it and you're like, or it only imported a subset of records and you're like, what happened? Yeah, anyway, okay, so I'm just going to show you the file. There's really not a whole lot to see, but I just want to, yes, 266 gigs down there, yeah. Yep. That's still impressive that you guys are able to handle that. Is it on a FileMaker server? Yeah, I'm gonna have to ask you some questions about that because yeah, we did not put this on a server. I didn't, do any tests on this. So yeah, very basic. We didn't even really make a nice data entry screen for this. This was really just getting it in there so you can query it. So I don't actually have 2 billion, almost 1.95. One of the things that I wanted to show you with this, you notice that the file pretty much opened instantaneously, which is nice. But that's because I have an SSD. This thing's very fast. This computer's, I got this 4 months ago. It's pretty much the latest and greatest. So one of the first things that I encountered after getting the data into the FileMaker file is how slow it is to open up this file, which is kind of a little strange because FileMaker is supposed to just give you, data as you need it. So what is it doing? I'll show you what it's doing. I do not understand what it's doing, but I can show you what it's doing. So let's go into the temp folder, which is this path down here. So I'm going to go to that. I guess I could copy it. Do one of those Go situations. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, whatever. Okay. All right, let's just go into here. Yeah. It's too late. It's too late. We're almost there. Okay. All right. So, okay. So do you see these are temp files, the .tmp files. So I'm going to close FileMaker Pro, and then FileMaker will delete whatever temp files. When you close Pro, it deletes the temp files I was using. Some cases, though, I've heard that it keeps it on the machine until you restart the machine, but in general, I've seen it just get rid of it when you close Pro. They might be. If you open it up, it's jargon. But one of the things, so you notice that I got rid of one of them, and the only one right here right now is a 12 kilobyte file. I'm going to open up this file, and it made this _2 here, which is also 12 kilobytes. But if you give it a second, it's now 333.4 megabytes. It's probably, yeah, indexes is likely what's going on. However, and this is something that I do wish I had indexes on this file, but I don't, unfortunately, so I can't show you guys finds. But you'll notice I have no indices on the table. So I have none of this. In this particular demo file, I don't. Yeah, so, right. To make the imports go much faster, we didn't have indexes on here. And then the idea was once we got the data in, then we create the indexes selectively for whatever fields that the client wanted to search. Anyway, so I don't know if it's indexes because we don't have indexes on the big table. Yeah, we'll get into all this. We'll get into this. This is yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, so if I have an external hard drive here, that's I think 3 terabytes, 2 terabytes. I can't remember. It might be more than that. But if I open the file on here, it takes like 10 minutes to open this file because it's creating that exact same 338 megabyte temp file, and the hard drive's much slower at that. SSD, you'll notice it just boom, like the FileMaker file is open before the temp file even refreshed, right? So this is an example of what I was talking about with disk bound versus processor bound. Opening up this file and creating these temp records is very much disk bound. So the faster that your SSD or hard drive, the faster it is to open up these very, very large tables. So that was fun. To open up the 2 terabyte on this external drive, it takes like 3 hours. Because it's creating a huge temp file, it's going to be, so this is like what is this? This is like 1/8 the size of the final one. So times that by 8, you know, it takes 10 minutes, multiply that by 8, whatever, a couple hours to 3 hours, it depends. I don't know what it is. You know what I mean? I don't know what it's doing. You know, it's a black box. And indexes are a very good guess, but I don't. Yeah, unless FileMaker is making some like placeholder indexes for all the fields. Like, hey, we're going to get some stuff eventually, right? Maybe. Maybe. It's all guesses. Yeah. I mean, there's a decent amount of just conjecture because I'm not a FileMaker engineer. I don't, personally have close friends that work at the wedge, so I don't know exactly what's going on. I bet I could get an answer if I really wanted to on some of this stuff, but I haven't at the moment. Yeah, so that is actually, so how does this, opening this up, hosted? I do not know. It wasn't server, didn't, it may be fast. I mean, this is part of the right. Yeah, and I believe servers just create one set of temp files, I think, when it comes to the overall file. I'm not entirely certain on that, but I believe it does. So it's not like it's creating these for every single user that opens it up and therefore it'll blow up your server. I don't think it does that. Okay. It's probably doing that. So do you guys have SSDs on your server? Yeah, SSDs will destroy the SAS array. Yeah, which, by the way, the client on this was going to get an SSD array because there wasn't any affordable like 3 or 4 terabyte SSD at the time we did this. So he was going to, I think, do an array of like 4 1 terabyte SSDs or something like that. But yeah, okay. So that's yeah, this is the background to this file. So if I decide to do a find on this thing, yeah. So yeah. So it's let me just show you a couple of these. If I do a find on this book indicator, which I believe has nothing in any of the fields. So it's going, yeah. So what's going on right now is it's going through all the 1.95 billion records and creating an index, and it's doing it pretty quickly. It's going through, I think, 110,000 records a second, but this will take like 4.5 hours to complete. Yeah. So I can cancel that because we don't need to. Yeah. I'm sure you guys have. You want to go home tonight. However, let's go to like a date field. This one is going like almost 3 times slower. So it would take 12 to 18. I don't know. You got to get a calculator out and do the math to figure out when this thing's going to eventually be done. But yeah, every single part of this project was slow. And indexes were the last step, and it was pretty much just like, I had told the client, I was like, you know, pick a handful of fields because otherwise you're going to be waiting another month for indexes. So. Yes. But I do think that, so some things I think are a mix. Like let's say indexing, it's not just one, like if you break it apart into its components, like one part of it is disk bound, another part is CPU. So it's not like, it's not as noticeable or overwhelming as opening that file. Like that file, opening that file and making the temp folder or the temp file is like almost completely disk bound. Like you could throw more CPU all day, I don't think it matters. Right. In this case, I think if you throw enough disk at it, there will be a point where you level off, and then CPU is what's going to start to matter. Yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah, but when it comes to writing, though, I mean, I haven't done a lot of testing in a few versions, but I feel like when FileMaker writes to a file, it like converges into a single threaded situation. Yeah. Sure. No, we don't have anything in particular. If a server is having general performance issues, yeah, no, we don't have any particular software when it comes to that. If you're like looking to see if how fast a particular script is running, then we usually just create records like a log table inside the FileMaker system. There's not a general like bolt-on solution for that. Yeah. When it comes to like if a server itself is just sluggish or at certain parts of the day, or when users do certain things, then like general performance monitoring can help you figure out like if it is a hardware problem, is it the disk that's slowing everything down, or is it? Right. I feel like VMs, this could be one of those like you think it's a problem, but it's not actually the problem. But I feel like VMs have issues sometimes. Like a normal server wouldn't. Like I feel like VMs are supposed to protect each other. Like the host is supposed to protect other VMs from like feeling each other or like. But I think that there's times where resources get taken up. Yeah. Right. Yeah, that would be an issue. Okay. All right. So just to recap, so let's go through, this project in a little more detail. So there are three main steps. The first step, so we were given, I think we were given, 575 fixed length files totaling 1 terabyte combined. Yeah. And FileMaker does not directly import fixed length files, right? You can't go to like import records and select fixed length file and then tell it like, here's the, Right. So our first step was to convert these fixed length files into a file type that FileMaker can import. And so we had decided to use a utility that I had used in another application years ago that's, I think, still in use. It's called Gock. I don't know if anyone's ever heard it before. It's a language. It's a programming language, but it's like a utility that you use like on command line. It is a language designed primarily for text parsing. So it's like perfect for taking the contents of a file and converting it into a different file. And so I actually have the Gock script here for you guys, just curious to see what this thing looks like. So what we did was, in this FileMaker file, I have a script that I wrote that converts the fixed length files to CSV. And it has you select the folder, and then it ends up exporting out the Gock file. Now this is an exe. I'm on a Mac. We ended up doing this all on a Windows machine. But you could get the equivalent on a Mac, I'm sure, and export it out. And then this is the actual Gock script that we used. So I'm going to yeah, so this is the script. So if you look at this, it's pretty hard to read. I don't know. It's like we did our best to format this in a readable way. Yeah. But basically, what this is this is the map right here. It's like, oh, here are the delimiters. Like this first field is 4 characters. The second field is 2. That is the delimiter for a fixed length is the number of characters for each. Yeah. And then you end up using, there are so regular expressions. So if you guys are familiar with regular expressions, this language uses it. You can see it because it's got like little dollar signs and yeah, anyway, so we, this thing is more complex than if you just literally converted the fields to CSV because, and I'll get into this, we ended up doing some logic inside Gock. Because we ran into a roadblock, a significant roadblock. So so we use this, and the script would go through the folder of 575 fixed length and then create the CSVs accordingly. That's a pretty smooth process. I think it took 3 or 4 days. Well, I mean, that's not bad, okay? That's not bad. Yeah, he knows. He knows. He's like lived it. He understands. 3 days, no problem. Yeah. Yep. So, great. We got that. We got the CSV. So part 1 done. Part 1 done. That was fairly smooth, and like I didn't really have many surprises there. So the next step, part 2, was the import. And I would say of anything in this project, this was where all of the problems were. So the first attempt that we made with importing is that we definitely didn't have any indexes on fields because you know indexes are going to really slow this thing down. But the customer wanted a few fields that were derived from the raw data, so he wanted some calculation fields. And these calculation fields weren't anything crazy. Let me show you the fixed length. Here's a sample fixed length file. I mean, the data's not anything crazy, but in here there's some dates that are split out into month, day, and year, or it may just be month and day, and we have to figure out the year, but we know the year because the files themselves have the year on them. Anyway, he wanted to be able to search dates, and we could have kept these separate, but he wanted like dates. We're like, okay, we'll give you dates. So we're just like doing some basic concatenation. I think I don't remember it exactly, but there's one place where we had to do like a left or a middle, and that was it. That was the death knell, using like a middle. What we did was we imported the first few files, and then based on that, we projected how long it would take to do the other 570, and it would have taken 200 days. I swear, I looked at the code. I made sure we weren't doing anything stupid or like really inefficient. Almost positive the way that we did the parsing was as good as you can get in FileMaker. As good as you can get. So we're like, well, calculation fields, we got to figure out a different way to give him what he needs that's not going to take 200 days. So we had to go back to the drawing board on that. And what I ended up doing is what I had mentioned before with Gock. So the complexity on the script is that we are taking some of these fields and doing the equivalent of those calculations. Yes. Yes, correct. So the end result is those fields that would have been calculations in FileMaker are just regular fields because we're importing those calculation results from the CSV. Yep. So that reduced the 200 days down to 20. Yeah, it was about an order of magnitude difference. I don't think it's just the middle function. I think in general, unfortunately, FileMaker's calculation engine is not anywhere near as hyper optimized as standard languages out there. That's my overall conclusion. Sure.
So take all of your data, shove as much of it as you can into the view, then parse the content of that view as opposed to
Yeah, I think. Oh yeah, I think we would end up at. It's still probably 9 times faster in Gock. It's like doing all the parsing in C++, basically. I believe Gock is pretty much C++. So it's like once it takes what your instructions and translates it, then it's just C++, and it's super fast. So we removed that roadblock. That was a significant thing because 200 days, like that would have killed the project immediately. The client wasn't going to wait that long for the data. So yeah, so that was the main roadblock for imports. Now, I want to mention something about file sizes. The original set, fixed length were 1 terabyte total. The CSVs were like 1.2. So converting fixed length CSVs added some space. Understandable because we're adding characters, right? We're adding commas, we're adding quotes in some cases. The FileMaker file, however, was 2.2 terabytes with no indexes. So just by the way FileMaker has to structure the data, it almost doubled the size. And I'm sure there's good reasons for it. There's another one of those black box situations of like, what's FileMaker doing? Is it kind of like the DDR where it's like XML structure everywhere, and that's why it's so much bigger? I don't know. But that's something to keep in mind if you're working with large data set in regular file, like regular basic text files, you need to get in the FileMaker, account for the fact that it's going to double, that size, the very minimum. And then the number of records that gets imported, well, the records themselves are going to be based on your actual files and how many lines are in there. But the size of the database, like 17 billion records in this case, being 2.2 terabytes is just happenstance, right? It totally depends on how many fields are in the table and how big, each of the pieces of data is for each of the records. So if these fixed length files were much wider, this could have been 4 terabytes, 5 terabytes for 17 billion records. It's a very narrow table. I mean, these records are trades, by the way. These are like stock market trades over the course of a year. That's why there's so many of them. And it's only for a handful of stocks. It's not for all of the stock market. So yeah. So one of the things that became a problem. So remember our temp files? Remember temp files? I remember temp files. That was the next roadblock in this journey. We started running the import. Everything's going hunky-dory. And then 3 days later, run out of disk space. And it's not because the FileMaker file is huge and we ran out, because we were doing all of this in a place where we can get to 2 terabytes, no problem. 3 days when we needed 20 doesn't make sense. It ended up being, is that? Right. Actually, yes, that's right. Okay, so here's what happened. Even though we got the FileMaker file on external drive, temp files are being made on the C drive. It's not that. This. And the temp files basically are increasing to the same size as how much you're adding, or roughly. And so after 3 days, it added like 250 gigs, 300 gigs, and my computer already had 250 and it's a 500, so it just ran out. And then it was like, done, all done. I can't do anything else, FileMaker out. Like, more black box stuff, dude. We don't know how temp files work, so I don't know what FileMaker is doing. But the end result is that we ran out of disk space on the C drive. Which this happens, by the way, on servers, just so because I know that IT people love to make the C drive as lean and mean as possible. Yeah, and if you have a sizable enough FileMaker system, you could run out of disk space on there because of the temp file. Yeah. Yeah, and that might be why. So, and if you don't restart your server, then it will still stay there. They'll get bigger as people add, you know. So, okay, so yeah, after like 2.5 days, 3 days, ran into this problem. What do? Okay, next roadblock. Now I got to think about this for a minute. I was like, I know how to get rid of temp files. I mean, you can try to delete the temp files, but if FileMaker Pro's open, I don't think it allows you to. Although I didn't go down that route. I felt like that was risky. I didn't know if it was going to corrupt things. What I did instead was in the script that does the import, I decided that we were going to have the script check after every file that's imported, or before every file that's imported, checks the space on the C drive. Yeah. Yeah. Yay. So I use base elements for this. Love base elements plugin. If you guys don't use base elements plugin, you should use base elements plugin. It's Swiss Army knife plugins, FileMaker. It's free. And so after the 75 gigs or less, we're going to then take a backup of the FileMaker file that we're currently importing data into. So using a save copy as, because it's a local file. Couldn't do that on a hosted file, but local file can do that, took advantage of it, made a backup. And then I closed FileMaker. I closed FileMaker here, but I use base elements to issue a reopen command. It runs a shell script that reopens FileMaker. So I'm like, hey, shell script, reopen FileMaker, but close FileMaker first. Like, it was able to do it in such a way that it was fine. I'm sure there might be a more elegant way to do this. Yeah. So there might be a better way to do this, but this is what I did. It worked. It was fine. And that worked around our problem. This is not normal. I think the one of the overarching themes here is this presentation, this project, not normal. None of this stuff is normal. But it's interesting. Interesting stuff to know. Some of this is good takeaways with the temp files and what have you. But yeah, so we did that, and then the backups were purposeful as well, because think about it. If you're running something for 20 days straight, what if you get in like day 17, computer crashes, your FileMaker files corrupt? You just lost 17 days. So these backups were insurance policies to make sure that if something did happen at some point, we could always revert back. Lose a couple days, but just like he said, yeah, it's fine. A couple days, no problem, right? So yeah, that is how we dealt with the temp files. No, in this case we didn't. But part of this was a learning experience for us. We were interested in this just being pure geeks, right? We're like, how much can we push FileMaker here, and can we actually accomplish this goal? And we did. We accomplished it. We got everything, to the client. But and then he wanted more querying. He wanted more querying capabilities. And FileMaker, and well, I'll show you, but FileMaker it's not meant for this. When you're up with this record size, it is not really meant for this. Yeah, it's time to go to, one of the standard SQL databases to do your queries. But it was an interesting experience. We all learned from it. Yeah, actually, I was on his podcast about this. Kevin and I were on there, and we talked. Kind of chatted because he did his own little thing too about scaling FileMaker. So, and we clashed a couple times. I was like, that's not the result I got. And he's like, what are you talking about? So, a little nerd clashing there. Yeah, so this shell script calls, and I don't have it with me, but it calls the script. It calls this exact script as well. So, yeah, because, right. That's a great observation. So, yeah, no, it's a great observation. So, that was actually something we did from the get-go. So that we have an import log here. And so it's all the files that we've imported and then some basic information about them. And the whole point of this was exactly what you said. We make sure that we don't import dupes. Yeah, so this one, but you got to see, these are these are 100, these are like 200 megs. And this is my demo file. This is not as variable. It was way more variable, these trading files. And their variability was because they were dated. I don't know if they were per day. I don't remember the exact details, but there were some days where a lot more trading happened than others. And so it would be, sometimes it would be like 0.2 gigs. Sometimes it was 10 gigs. Yes. Or right at the end of the year when everyone's like, oh, we just got paid 401k, bonuses, go, or like sell everything off. Yeah, whatever. So, I like data. Yes, that's right. Yeah, so, okay, I did not have, at the get-go, did not have all this. I believe that all I had was the file, start and end, and then duration. I just cared about which files I'd import because the main goal was making sure we don't import dupes, and then I was just curious how long these were taking. The rest of this stuff happened as a result of another roadblock. So, remember the 32, 64-bit thing I mentioned? Yeah. So this was we were building this like right around the time, right before 14 came out, or right around the time 14 did come out. And 14 was the first version with 64-bit clients. I believe I had a preview version of it. I'm not certain exactly what I had at the time, but I was doing this all in 32-bit. And what I was experiencing was that everything was hunky-dory for importing files under 4 gigs. The moment that I hit anything that was over 4 gigs, it would only import a subset of the record. Very weird. And I will credit Kevin on this one. Kevin's a very creative guy. He figured out what I think, like in general, the behavior that's happening. What we observed was that FileMaker in 32-bit was doing a mod 4 on the file size and only importing the remainder. So if you had let's say you had a 6.5 gig file, FileMaker will import 2.5 because that, if you divide it by 4, the remainder is 2.5. It like literally followed that pattern. And so that is when I was like, that's scary, right? I'm like running this stuff for 20 days and then I come back and you're like, we're missing records. And you have really no visibility except for, I think part of what happened and how I learned of it was that I was looking at the overall stuff up here and I was seeing how many files we had imported and I was looking at the number of records and they were not matching up. File size, number of records, I was like, we're short. Something weird's going on. And then we figured out, and what I ended up doing was that I added all these other metrics, the size of the file, the number of lines being the number of returns in the file, basically the number of records. And then I started adding this, records imported, and then the other fun stuff here. But I used this to verify that each file came in clean. What I did was I compared the number of records that actually got imported, so the found set from import records, with the number of lines that was in that file. Yeah, well, I got these. So I got that data for the number of lines in a file. So normally when we count lines in a file, I think you could use like base elements, read contents, do a count on the number of whatever. But that didn't go so well for these files. Just like every single thing in this project. So I had to reach back. So there was a pattern forming of like, I should just use utilities. Let me Google, is there a utility on a Mac that can count the number of files, a number of lines on a file? And yes, there is. So I have a script here called get the number of files in the entire CSV folder. So I was looping through each of the files and issuing this system command, this WC, and that literally stands for word count. That's a command line utility on a Mac. Yes, that's a Unix. And that was way fast. That was super fast. So, yeah. Once I got that, then I was like, great. Now that I got the number of lines, that gives me the number of records. And so, right here, I got my little validation section. And because this thing is like basically just running in its own little corner in our office, I can't just pop up an error message, right? That's no one's looking at it. So I have these little scripts to email errors, right? So, yep. It's funny because when you like look at code, you're like, oh, this seems like not that. It doesn't take that long to write this, right? It's not that. How many lines of code is this? This is 153 lines of code. Oh man. Oh, easy. Code is very deceiving. Okay, so I did use the 64-bit version, I think the preview version of 14, as like I was curious, did that work around this limitation? And it did. It can import files greater than 4 gigs. I did, however, find that, like, I think the imports were slowing down as we added more records or something, and it was becoming a problem. So I was like, okay, well, I can't use 64-bit 14, so let's go back to 32-bit 13, and I need to make all of these CSVs that are over 4 gigs smaller than 4 gigs. How do I do that in a timely manner? Maybe I should find another utility. And so I did, and that utility is called split. I know, all these like word count split, I know it's WC, it doesn't, but word count split, like Gock doesn't make any sense, but these do, like from an actual what it does. So yeah, I think you like tell it the max file size that you want for each of the split files, and I think that's 3.9 gigs, right? I gave a little cushion. I wasn't trying to like push the limit there. But yeah, so this thing also was fairly fast, and it created a lot more files than 575. I think you see right here, it ended up being 783 files after it split the ones that were bigger than 4 gigs. And then at that point, I think we got through all of the workarounds and all of the roadblocks in the import step of this project. So. In the 32-bit, as we imported more records into this table, performance didn't get impacted, which is great. That's what we wanted, right? Because indexing was turned off. If we have indexing on, I believe it would have gotten slower over time. So that was good, but we went to 64-bit on 14, at least with the preview version, it was slow. It like got slower and slower and slower, progressively slower, which is a bad thing. It got faster? Oh, you mean like just in general, each import would be faster because it's 64-bit? Yeah, you'd think so, but there wasn't a substantial difference. And then it did get substantially slower as we added more records to the table. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yep. Yep, good times. And that is actually why I added the time per rec, because that was the easiest metric that I could glance at and go, is this thing getting slower? Is it getting slower? Is it getting slower? And you'll see here, it's pretty consistent. Actually, there's some of these files that are super fast, but they're all pretty much like 164, I think it's what is that? 0.1 milliseconds per record or something like that, whatever that is. I don't think so, because that's why this time per rec is actually a really nice metric, because it doesn't matter how big these file sizes are. It gives you how long it takes to import a single record in this file. And in this case, these files are all the same, so it's very consistent. But from what I remember, it was very consistent, no matter how the file size is. So, but I think, I don't know. Maybe it would have been faster, but that is not. I didn't see anything substantial out of it when I was just looking at the data to change course from what we were doing. Gock was, yeah, but the imports were done on a Mac. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mention that, but. Actually, I don't know, Mike. Was I on 30? Did I do the imports on Mac? Mike was around during this process. That's true. This is true. Nah. Well, yeah. Yeah, but I know that FileMaker 13 Pro for Mac was not 64-bit. I'm almost positive it wasn't. Right. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Okay. All right, so the final step, and what I've shown you guys, already given you a little bit of a sneak peek on that, was indexing. So once we got through this part of the project, which, once we got it all said and done, I don't know, I think we were like 45 to 60 days into the actual project by the time we had to stop and start, redo things, and right? Which was, I think, already much longer than we anticipated, but, we also knew that there was a lot of unknowns in this project. I mean, I was regularly communicating with the client, and he was fairly understanding, but there was a certain amount of frustration, especially towards the end, but what's that? I mean, the time that I've spent on his project was hourly, but we didn't, of course, bill him for the computer time. We didn't do that. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so indexing, we had 23 files in the 2 terabyte FileMaker file. And initially he wanted to index all of them. Then I told him it would take 2 to 3 months to index all those fields, because every index took 3 days to complete-ish, plus or minus. But as I showed you, it does depend. There's factors here. Yeah, it was 23 fields. But the time to index depends on, it's the type of field, and I also believe it depends on the variation of the data in the field. I haven't fully tested that, but I believe it does. Yeah, so what I'm doing, so strike price right here has a lot of variation in it. And I'm doing the same search I did for the book indicator, and it's doing 55,000 a second. So it's about half the speed as the book indicator, and they're the same data type, they're the number. And the book indicator, I think, is completely blank, but it'd be a Boolean if there's any ones in there. Oh, no, you can do it simultaneously, but you have to go to Manage Database. I mean, I guess you don't. I guess you could just go into find mode and do asterisks on every one of these. But that's actually, you don't create every index doing that. You just do straight asterisks. So text fields have two different types of indexes. They've got a word index and a value index. And depending on the type of operator you use in find mode, it'll create one or the other for you. So I don't know which one the asterisk search does, but it creates one. So even if you go through and do finds on all of them, there could be, you could later go and do another search on that field, one of those fields, those text fields, on it with a different operator, and all of a sudden you're back to indexing again because it's got to create the other index. So what I did was I ended up just going through each one of these managed database that he wanted and just making it all. Because when you do that and you save managed database, then it'll go through and create all of the indexes. I'm not going to do that here because for what... you can't cancel. I don't know why the cancel button's not on that managed database side. Yeah, so here's a fun thing. I was doing that earlier today. Yeah, so I was trying to create an index so I could show you guys a search with this many records in it, but didn't end up doing it today. But yeah, just didn't work out. However, I had to force quit at one point. I did the managed database side because I didn't have a cancel button on the little pop-up. And then when I opened FileMaker back up, and it went through, its recovery check or whatever, when I opened it back up, it tried to resume the index. This thing still haunts me. You know what I mean? Like I can't. Everything you do. So I was like, is this a temp? Is this a cache thing with 15 where it's like trying to be smart and like resume things like when you open it back up or something? And I looked and there weren't any temp files or anything. I don't know. I had to end up just wiping this thing out and getting a fresh copy of the system because otherwise it would have tried to index for like 21 hours. Yeah, so indexing is a big pain if you need to go through that with a huge table. Yeah, you can script it by doing finds and. But to make sure you get both indexes created for every text field, I think you would need to do an OR search with one operator that does one and the other operator does the other. And I don't know that list right now. Yeah, so one of the things that was surprising to me that ended up being a good thing was I was expecting these indexes to blow up the database size. At least, we thought so because you always hear indexes like make databases so much bigger. That didn't happen. It didn't happen in this case. At least yeah, the text, I just have like, simple set of numbers, but there are variation, like at least in here there's variation. Like with the prices and like all the prices are variable, the quantities are pretty variable. Yeah. Anyway, point is though, there's some fields here that have a good amount of variation. I would expect indexes to be bigger because of that. But when I was doing the indexes, each index only added like 0.2% to the file size. So I think after we created all the indexes that he wanted, we didn't end up creating like 23, but when we created like, I don't know if it was 10 or 13, like it was only a few percentages larger compared to the original size. Now, I don't know if you guys have had different experiences. Maybe big notes fields like you were saying, or is it a different story? Oh, yeah. I mean, they were the 3 days. I mean, it was pretty much I don't even know if we ever got to that point, though. I mean, the customer ended up going to a different platform, and the only way they couldn't use it the way you wanted to use it. He started doing searches, and he could do some basic searches, but we'll talk about that here in a second. But like, yeah. So we didn't actually, the indexing and the projections I was making were based off of a 2 billion file like this. I created one of these because it was very substantial, but not so much that I couldn't put it on an SSD. So that's where the 3 days comes from. It would have taken, I'm sure it would have taken another month to go through and to do like 13 files. It would probably take a month and a half probably by the time it was all done. If we would have done the 2.2 terabyte on indexing like 10 to 13 fields, probably would have been a month and a half on top of the original timeline. Yeah, so one of the things I ran into is that I could not successfully create a single index on an external drive with a 2.2 terabyte. Like I tried to, and no. FileMaker would freeze every time. Now I don't know if they've resolved that or what caused it, but we couldn't do it. But when I put it on, when I was able to create indexes, well, actually, you know what? In this case, I think it was the 2 billion record file. I couldn't create it on here, but I could create it on SSD. So I don't even think we tried the 2.2. I don't think there was ever an environment in which we could, because he did end up doing the array and he tried to do things himself, but I couldn't create indexes. Like at that point, he tried to do it himself, and I was kind of out of my hands, and it was in his. And yeah, but yeah. So indexes. So once they were there, finds became fairly performant. For billions of records, we would get back results within 3 or 4 seconds in some searches, which is pretty good. But one of the things that we had found was that sometimes it would be really slow if your find returned a ton of records. So it was faster as your result set, as your found set you got back was smaller. So I don't know if FileMaker is like having to like take all the IDs of your found set and give it to you. Like I'm not sure exactly what's going on there, but that was something that I had noticed and I showed him this over a GoToMeeting. Was like, hey, let me do a range search that gives back a tiny set. That was pretty fast, but as I did same range search, but I like just made it so like I got back half the records in the table from that range search. It was slow, super slow. And so, FileMaker's using the index, but I don't on things, but I don't. There's something else going on, like with the temp files that are slowing things down if you get back a big result set. So, yeah, and then finds are definitely so in terms of like going back to disk bound, processor bound. Finds are definitely faster in SSDs. There's no question. I was doing comparisons with the 2 billion on here versus on the hard drive, and they were definitely faster. But just like indexing, I think there's a portion of the find where CPU matters, because FileMaker's got to actually do comparisons of stuff, right? Like it's got to actually do some processing. So there's a certain portion that's disk bound, there's a certain portion that's processor bound. But I definitely saw a substantial increase in performance by going to SSDs with finds. And then indexing also similar, like I had mentioned before. And then imports were one thing that was not faster with an SSD. It was pure processor bound as far as I could tell, which did kind of surprise me. But it's FileMaker's, I guess, just doing tons of processing. Yeah. So. Oh, I believe that. I think that I've heard talk from some engineers that they're trying to do something like that. That's interesting. Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, so I only have one other thing to mention here. Right. Wow. Correct, right, yeah. Yeah, yeah. All right, I have one more thing. I have one more thing to show. That was another. This is one example of what made the client kind of go like, I can't use this thing. When he would navigate records, so if I just go, so I'm up here the slider. If I slide to the beginning or the end, it's good. It's instantaneous. I can like go through records one at a time, no problem. But if I'm like, let's just kind of start browsing. If I had a list view and I was like, I want to go in the middle. Uh-oh. 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 No, it'll load. It takes a minute. Yeah, it might be literally a minute. Yeah, so this is something that I don't know what FileMaker is doing, but all it's telling me is that when it comes to accessing records, it's not array access. It's not, because array access, no matter which record you go to, it's always the same speed. Yeah, it's almost like it's like a linked list or something, like depending on where you are, and I don't know, but yeah. So like I think we. Yeah. Right. Yeah, when you go to a list view, which I don't even think I have one on here, but list view is unusable when you start really scrolling through this because it's like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So, because one of the things you wanted to do was you do a query, maybe get back 200 million records in his query, and like you kind of wanted to start scrolling through a little bit, see what he's got, so you can start refining his query. And you couldn't do it. Like, it would just be unusable. It would take him, a long time to really like kind of browse through the data. Yeah, every tool has its limitations, so yeah. Hmm. Right. Oh yeah. Yeah. Hmm. Right. Right. Yeah. Yep. Yep. So. Okay, so you guys have any other questions? That is the end of all the things that all the lessons learned we kind of ran into in this project. You know, going back to what I had mentioned before with this is not everything with scaling, right? Like mostly what you're dealing with in a normal FileMaker environment when it comes to scaling is handling like unsort calcs and WAN performance and, you know, reducing the number of individual queries that have to load on layouts and stuff like that. That's not. So let's talk about working with billions of records. I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is how much SSDs do make a difference. They do. I mean, in general, of course, they make a difference with just regular, you know, computing and loading. But when it comes to pretty much almost all operations, basic operations, it makes a difference, and sometimes a substantial difference. Oh, well. Yeah, which we didn't even touch relational. Didn't touch that. Yeah, there you go. There's your answer. Somewhere in the middle. 100 million to 2 billion. Yeah, I would think billion's too much. There's just too many issues you're going to run into, especially, you know, when you actually have like a lot. If you have that many records in a table, you probably have a lot of users, and you probably have a big system, and you're already running to all sorts of other issues you got to worry about. And he doesn't want to, at night. Yeah. Did you get rid of the indexes before you did that? Did you get rid of the indexes before you did that? Yeah, it's rough. Any other questions? Do you guys have any just general questions about scaling, both about this stuff or about like not scaling? Good. Yeah. Well, FileMaker by default will just create indexes for you the moment that somebody does a find in a field. And I think that behavior is it's permanent. Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's a good FileMaker default, in my opinion. I think it's the thing you want, the thing you expect as a user. Any other questions? Cool. All right. Thank you.